Good Wednesday afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. A little later in the show, we will head out to Kansas City. Leif Lisec, Chiefs analyst for Spectrum Sports KC, will join us. He'll give us some inside information about what's going on with the Kansas City Chiefs as they get ready to do battle with the Browns in Arrowhead Stadium, 4:25 Sunday, Week 1, one of the marquee games. Some news from out in Berea today. Jadeveon Clowney did not practice with the Browns due to an illness. It is not, repeat, it is not COVID-related. Kevin Stefanski talked to the media. He talked about the Browns getting ready to go into Arrowhead to face the Kansas City Chiefs.
Game week, so we've got a big challenge this week going into Arrowhead Stadium. Really well-coached team, really across the board on offense, defense, special teams. They have great players. So our preparations are underway. Had meetings this morning, walk through, and then we'll get out here for practice this afternoon. Yeah, so we've been working crowd noise really since the spring, just because we felt like going into this year without teams dealing with crowd noise for a full calendar year, we needed to make sure that we were on point in our communication and our silent count. We were on the silent count in Arrowhead last time we were there in the playoffs, even with whatever it was, 20,000. So we know it's going to be loud. You kind of deal with it matter-of-factly and understand what you're walking into, and really just have to make sure that our preparation, our communication, our operation is on point.
Let's welcome in Doug Lesmerises, columnist for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. And Doug, it's here. Game week is moving forward. That's something I didn't even think about in leading up to this game, is the crazy crowd that's going to be waiting for the Browns at Arrowhead.
No, and it's one of the reasons why this is extra tough. I mean, again, this is the toughest game on their schedule because of team and because of venue, right? That it's Patrick Mahomes in a place that gets nuts for football. So it is really everything you could ask for a test for the Browns right off the bat. And it's going to be really hard for them to check every box because there are a lot of boxes to check in this one. I just did have a flash, though, watching Kevin Stefanski and just thinking to myself, he seems like the kind of guy, right? Like, yeah, we get it. He's handsome. We get it. But he's not even 40 yet. He's got kind of the gray and the beard. I bet you he's going to look exactly the same 20 years from now. He will not age at all. And I just was thinking, like, this whole thing, like Kevin Stefanski talking about getting ready for a year, we're going to do this again in 2028. Then we're going to get to do it in 2034. Then we're going to do it in 2039. And that's just going to be normal. And it's like, now we're kind of like, woo, Kevin Stefanski, a big game for the Browns. And like, we're just going to be at a point where it's like, oh yeah, the Browns are good. They're playing another big game. Kevin Stefanski's a good coach, whatever. And like, isn't it kind of fun to think about that future? I just had a moment, Dave. I just had a moment and I wanted to reflect, you know?
Fair enough. And you know what? We'll take that for 20 years for what we've been through the previous 20 years getting ready for openers. Think about that for a minute, huh? All right, Baker Mayfield. He has been kind of the voice of the Browns. I mean, he's done everything you want franchise quarterback to do, taking on the leadership role. Here's what he had to say about getting ready to face that Chiefs defense in Arrowhead.
Obviously, they've been playing extremely well together for a while. They're forcing you to make mistakes. They're trying to do that, trying to get the ball out of your hands and make you take chances. So it's about, like I said, doing our job, taking care of the football. But they do a great job of, creating mismatches and trying to get guys free on blitzes. And obviously, you said it, the gold standard. I mean, they've been top of the top in the AFC for the past decade or so. So, I mean, it's, they're highly competitive, so it's good for us to play somebody like that. But, it's all about the next game. So we're playing the Chiefs this week, and then, hopefully, obviously, looking for a win, and then move on to the next one after that. And you try and improve each week. And so this week we're trying to just do our job.
And again, Doug, that's one of the things that I'll be keeping an eye on, taking care of the football and kind of, you want him to take his chances being Baker, but you want him to be calculated when he's going to take his chances.
For sure. And I don't think they're going to beat Kansas City without taking some chances, right? I mean, this is not nice 7-yard throw, Baker, do that 30 times and the Browns will win. And he's not going to do that. But Dave, I apologize. I can't remember what I say on this show, what I say on my podcasts, what I say out in the world. But a thing that I am thinking about Baker Mayfield is that throw against Atlanta. We didn't see him much in the preseason, but that touchdown throw against Atlanta in the preseason, rolling out left, putting it right on the money, so in control, yet it's a tough throw, was as reassuring a preseason throw I think any quarterback could ever make. And that is the type of throw I am expecting Baker Mayfield to replicate 150 times this year, right? Like a tough throw in a big spot, and it leads to points. And just watching him again, Dave, I had a moment. I was thinking, imagine 10 years from now, people be saying, hey, Baker, wow, crazy. You're getting ready for year 14 in the NFL or whatever. Like, didn't you just see that too? All the stuff of Baker, we know college Baker, fired up, chip on the shoulder Baker. But doesn't that just also look like the guy who's like, yeah, that's our guy. You trust that guy. That guy's the quarterback. That guy's in charge. That guy's got it. That guy's got talent and he's got maturity. And it's like, you can just feel it coming together. It's happening. It's really happening. You started off the show by saying it's happening, Dave, which is where we are. How about it, man? I have no analysis left. How about it? It's here and they're good and it's all real. How about this? And they're going to keep doing it. Man, this job's going to be easy. Imagine us 8-10 years from now. We'll just be like, yeah, Browns are still good. What else you got?
All right. So Nick Chubb, last time the Browns were on the field in a game that mattered, it was in Arrowhead. Wasn't the result the Browns wanted. And Nick Chubb talked about that game and then moving forward to this year.
Man, I just held on to the feeling of how I felt, and the team did the same thing after that game. We knew how we felt. We didn't want to experience it anymore. But, I mean, overall, just a great learning experience for us, and we learned from it. That's the thing about the first game of the season. I mean, the first game, you don't have film or tape to see what they're going to do. So, I mean, we got to just go out there and stick to our rules, stick to our training, and just play our game.
And he mentions first game of the year. I think that's a huge advantage for the Browns defense. I don't think Andy Reid has any idea. We don't have any idea what the Browns defense is going to be this year under Joe Wood. And I think that is an advantage to the Browns defense against a really talented Kansas City offense.
I don't know if I agree with that just from the standpoint of like they haven't played together. So, right. So what's better, that Andy Reid doesn't know what to expect, or that like John Johnson III and Greg Newsome don't sort of know what to expect from each other, and Anthony Walker and Tommy Togiai don't know what to expect from each other. And you know, like I do think there will be a maturation process, a familiarity with this Browns defense that I don't know that it will match what we saw with the offense last year, because the offense, it was year one of the Stefanski scheme. It was COVID. It was Baker really trying to figure out, and we clearly saw sort of the dividing line for the offense last year. I don't think it'll be that stark for the defense, but I think it could be somewhat similar, where by the time we get to week 12, 14, 16, 17, we'll be like, oh, yeah. No, this defense, that's the defense. But I don't know that we'll see it right away. But listen, Dave, you could be right. There's something to the idea of you can't watch film on the Browns defense from last year and figure that out, because Joe Woods didn't have any toys last year. It was like, well, Miles does his thing. Let's see what happens. And there wasn't a lot else there. The possibilities of what Joe Woods could unleash, it's possible that you're right, that the unfamiliarity breaks more the Browns' way. But I'm still expecting this defense to be significantly better in the second half than in the first half of the season.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just think there's a lot of athletic ability to overcome communication mistakes, and I think the ability to do some things that aren't expected of you defensively exists. But I get where you're coming from with the communication. All right, Bill Barnwell from ESPN makes a case for each team making the Super Bowl. And for the Browns, he points to Baker Mayfield's second year under Kevin Stefanski and the jump that guys like Aaron Rodgers have made in a similar system. And I think that's a very valid point. I think Baker Mayfield is going to have a big year. And if he does, this offense is going to be awfully, awfully good.
I have to cough. Like Jadeveon Clowney, it is not COVID related. I just had a little tickle. 100% agree. But there's multiple. Listen, if you want to play the game of why will the Browns jump, right? Like if Bill Barnwell's going through it, making a Super Bowl case for 32 different teams, I think you could make 8 cases for the Browns, right? That Myles Garrett is paired with a guy in Jadeveon Clowney he's never quite had before, and we haven't really seen Myles Garrett with a perfect full season in a couple years. What's that going to look like? I think you could say a completely revamped secondary is going to allow them to be so much better against the pass. What's that going to look like? I think you could say, what does a healthy Odell Beckham Jr. do in this offense in terms of opening up a deep threat and expanding the explosiveness of this team? That's the reason. I think you could lean on how many teams have a full offensive line back that is this good, that if they were arguably the best offensive line in football last year, they're going to double down on that this year. I think that could be a reason. So I don't disagree with the reason that Bill Barnwell picked, and he's one of the best football analysts out there. But I think my point with the Browns is they have more than one way to make a case for the Super Bowl, which strengthens every other case. But I probably agree that Baker, Stefanski, year 2 together after all the uncertainty early in Baker's career does make sense as the number one thing to point to.
Yeah, all very valid points. Doug Lesmerises, columnist for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll hear from Baker Mayfield and Kevin Stefanski about year 2 in this offense. Also, who is the biggest challenger to Kansas City in the AFC? We'll take a stab at that. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions, lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns football with Doug Lesmerises from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Kevin Stefanski and Baker Mayfield both talked today about Baker Mayfield and really the entire offense's second year in the same offensive system.
I feel great about where we're at heading into week 1 compared to last year, just because of, having that communication with Kevin, AVP, about, game plan wise, thoughts, suggestions, whereas last year I was still learning and getting some of those live reps on some of the new schemes that we were doing. So for me, obviously far ahead of where it was, and I think I'd say the same for everybody else as well.
We all want to single Baker out, but I would just tell you, for each one of these players, having another year in the system is really beneficial. I think for us as coaches, we want to make sure that the guys play fast and don't think. And a lot of times when you're installing a new system, there's a lot of thinking going on, and it's harder to play free. So I would say that's true of all of our players.
Let's bring back in Doug Lesmerises, columnist for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. And Doug, I can't say that often enough. That's so critical that this offense has not had the same system 2 years in a row. since, it's been like 4 or 5 years. And that's another reason that you expect not only Baker Mayfield, but everybody to be a little bit sharper and a little bit crisper. And I think you saw that with Baker Mayfield, even though it was just 2 series. There was a quickness and a decisiveness. It was second nature to him, which is what you want from a quarterback.
I'll make 2 analogies here, Dave. One is if we go back and think about, when I first started being on this show, and I would stick to the script, and you ask a question and I would answer it. And now, I'm coughing, I say random stuff, but it's because we're in the flow, right? So, and it's better, I don't know, maybe people think it's worse. I like it even more. But I do think it's like when you learn a foreign language. I think a lot of times, I remember this, coming across athletes who their first language isn't English, and you're speaking to them, and you can have a communication with them and you can interview them, but you can tell the guys when they get a mastery, when you can have a personality in your language. And sometimes when you learn a second language, you're just so worried about getting the verbs right that it's hard to have a personality. And then you think, man, I wish I could talk to them in their native language and I'd really get to know them better. I think Baker Mayfield is going to have a personality in this offense, an on-field personality where he's going to have enough comfort that he's going to be able to take the next freelance step off of it. He's going to have the ability to take the calculated risk, where I think sometimes last year he might have been right, he might have been wrong, but it was kind of like, well, I'm just trying to do the thing. And man, when you have that comfort, it just opens up the whole world. No matter what you're doing, when you're comfortable doing something, you're better at it, and everybody knows it. And I think absolutely no doubt about it, that's what we're going to see with Baker Mayfield. And Kevin Stefanski's right. Of course it applies to everybody else. But it's not as big of a deal for Joel Bitonio. It's not as big of a deal for Austin Hooper. It's not as big of a deal for Jarvis Landry. It's Baker who's got to have the deep, deep understanding that's going to let him be the quarterback he can be.
Yeah, he touches the ball literally on every play. So, yeah, the ball is in his hands, and he needs to have that understanding. All right, so the question was posed on ESPN's Get Up. Marcus Spears, who is the biggest threat to the Chiefs in the AFC? Here's his answer.
The Browns. I understand what Jeff Darlington is saying, but I believe what Cleveland did last year, identity-wise, tells us that. And it really is all about what Jeff Saturday said. If they control the line of scrimmage. Here's the thing you got to do to the Chiefs, all right? If you had a dream of keeping them to 12 points, you better keep the damn football from an offensive standpoint. And that's something the Chiefs, that's something the Browns can do. They can bleed you with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and the screen game and the quick passing game from Baker and getting the ball in these guys' hands. The Browns are more suited to put together 12, 13 play drives because of the way that they play football way Stefanski values being in third and short situations. Now we getting into football. Like when you get to this point, it's not just about the talent. It's not just about the guys that we looking at on the roster. It's styles make fights. And the Cleveland Browns has a style that gives the Chiefs more problems than most teams. Last year, we saw the Las Vegas Raiders just go toe-to-toe, deep ball after deep ball, and you beat the Chiefs that way. That's a slippery slope because we know what happened last time. The Browns can bludgeon you, and they can keep Pat Mahomes off the field.
And, Doug, I again, that makes a whole lot of sense. The lines on both sides of the ball for the Browns are pretty good at this point.
I agree that the Browns are the biggest threat to the Chiefs. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I do think sometimes we can fall into the, hey, you're playing a great offense, hold the ball, win time of possession, bludgeon them, as Marcus Spears said. And I still wonder sometimes if that really is enough. The thing that I think would separate the Browns is that they can do that, but if you get OBJ back involved, and then you can take a shot that matters. And you have playmakers on the defensive side of the ball that can make big plays. It's a little bit, listen, Minnesota and Ohio State played in week 1 in college football. Minnesota wanted to hold the ball and bludgeon Ohio State. And they had a great running back in Mo Ibrahim, who then was lost for the year with an injury, unfortunately. But they held the ball. They had a good offensive line. That's what they wanted to try to do against Ohio State, right? But then when Ohio State did get the ball, they just threw 60-yard touchdown passes to Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And it was like, well, congratulations, Minnesota, on holding the ball, but you had no explosion. to match Ohio State's explosion. You couldn't stop Ohio State's explosion, and you couldn't match it offensively. I don't think anybody can actually bludgeon the Chiefs. I don't think you're going to time of possession them off the field. I think you have to have your own explosion yourself, at least not to match the Chiefs, but to be in range. And you have to have some ability defensively to do something to stop them. And that's where I think I like the Browns, that they have all the stuff that Marcus Spears said, the run game, whatever. But now add OBJ, a more confident Baker Mayfield, and then defensively, Miles can get after it. You can try and say, Denzel Ward, we're going to lock you up on a guy. John Johnson III is going to be roaming around back there. If I'm talking about why I think the Browns are the best challenger for the Chiefs, I'm certainly including that. I am not getting locked into time of possession, bludgeon them, because in the end, I still question whether that's really the way to get over the top against any explosive offense.
You know, the one thing that's concerning is Patrick Mahomes is a guy who you can do everything right defensively, and he can still find a way to make a play that hurts the defense.
Oh, right. So which is, to me, I mean, I think the idea of like, hey, the Browns went on an 8-minute and 23-second touchdown march, and then Patrick Mahomes came on the field, you know, and threw a touchdown in 51 seconds. Like, okay, then, you know, the Kansas City defense comes back on the field and they're tired. I get it. But like, that could be demoralizing too. Like, we worked so hard for our points and he threw a pass between his legs 60 yards and it went like that. I think you have to be able to match that one way or another. And listen, you're not going to stop Patrick Mahomes, but get one Myles Garrett strip sack.
Right.
Get him one time, Myles. In all those snaps, get him one time. Get one play where Denzel Ward does something, where he makes a diving play on third down to knock a ball away, or he gets a pick, where John Johnson, that Tyrann Mathieu pick against in the playoff game against Baker Mayfield last year, you have a smart safety who is reading things. Give John Johnson the chance to make one play like that. I like the chances of this Browns defense having 5 or 6 guys who each can make one play that flips the game. And I like the explosion offensively on top of the run game, where if you didn't have, and they didn't have that last year. And that's why in the end, they couldn't really hang, because they had to work hard for everything. Add the explosion on top of it. And that's what gets you over the top. I don't think you can bludgeon the Chiefs, because Patrick Mahomes is just going to get up and throw 5 touchdown passes anyway.
Yeah, and again, that's a generational quarterback that the Chiefs have over there. All right, Pro Football Focus. Biggest breakout candidate at each position. Browns have one of them. Defensive tackle Malik McDowell. And Doug, this is a guy that's incredibly fascinating. I love the story, and I can't wait to see him in regular season action.
Yes. Who wants to be the guy to, like, you know, throw cold water on the Malik McDowell story? Everybody looks great in the preseason, but not everybody can play, right? And we are at a point with the Browns where it's like they have 36 guys that you can get excited about. It is a great story. I'm trying to be a little circumspect about how much impact he's going to have on the defense when they have a couple other more experienced guys in there that he'll rotate. I think he can help them. I think it's a plus for the Browns that he made the roster. It was a risk. I think that was a good risk to take. Give a guy a second chance. He has a chance to help you. This just seems like a little bit of a stretch to me. I mean, what's he gonna do? You think he's gonna play half the snaps? And I don't know. I'm happy to be wrong, but there's just sometimes in the preseason we can end up talking about Malik McDowell and Anthony Schwartz and Demetric Felton a lot, and it's like, okay, but I mean, what are they really in the end? Isn't it going to be Myles Garrett and Odell Beckham Jr. and Nick Chubb, right? So we're all looking for breakouts, but you know, I think David Njoku still fits like a breakout kind of category, but I think that's a guy who's been around and is legitimately going to have opportunity and the ability to level up this year. So I'd go more with a guy like that, but I'm happy to come back in a couple of weeks and have Malik McDowell set the league on fire, and I'll be wrong.
Fair enough. All right, Doug Lesmerises, columnist for The Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Greg Newsome named the starter at cornerback opposite Denzel Ward. Not a surprise, but we'll hear from Greg about making his NFL debut against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns football with Doug Lesmerises, columnist for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Before the break, mentioned Greg Newsome named the starter. Not a surprise. We've been hearing that and saying that since very early in training camp. It was made official yesterday, he was told. So he gets the opportunity, is the way he's looking at it, to face Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in his first NFL game.
I mean, that's just in the job description against, any quarterback. Obviously, Pat Mahomes is arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the whole National Football League. So, it's just what we've been doing every single day out here is just sticking to your man. You got to play the whole play through. That's at the end of the day, that's what we got to do to be successful. I mean, they're just a very talented offense in general. They got a lot of great players on the offense, so it's definitely going to be a fun game.
So, Doug, you look at it, you got a rookie opposite Denzel Ward against a high-powered offense, but he's shown pretty well when given the opportunity. There's nothing that he has done that has made you say, I'm worried about Greg Newsome.
One of the favorite stories that all of us in the media like to do is when we look back with a guy and say, hey, remember when you had a rough game and everything you learned from that and how much better you are now, and now you're going to go out and show everybody what you're really all about. And the guy says, yeah, I will go back and I watched that film and I can't believe all the things I didn't know. Man, I'm a much better player now. But then sometimes we don't want to admit that those games are coming, the game that you have a bad game that you have to learn from. I think the guy might get fried, man. I love Greg Newsome. I think Greg Newsome is going to be a fan favorite in Cleveland. I think he is exactly what you want. I love his personality. I love his game. The fact that he was there for the Browns at that point in the draft is awesome. He's playing Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill in the first game of his NFL career. I think it might go poorly. And and guess what? When the Browns and Chiefs are facing off in the AFC Championship game, we'll say, Greg Newsome, let's look back on that game when Tyreek Hill turned you into a pretzel. Look how much better you are now. And he'll say, yeah, I can't believe it. I've really learned a lot. But we have to admit that game one might go poorly. So I am worried. He's never played. Tyreek Hill is crazy good. Patrick Mahomes is a magician. I think it might be a problem. Not later. Week one might be a problem.
There might be a play or two, but you know what? I think he'll be just fine.
Nobody wants to admit that it's hard when it's hard. We only admit it's hard later.
Sure.
When it gets easier, we look back and say it was hard. Nobody in the moment wants to admit, man, this is actually pretty hard. This is a tall task for a guy who was in college last year.
Yeah, you know what? You send Denzel Ward on Tyreek Hill, and he's got he's got Mecole Hardman. He's good to go. We're good with that. All right. So Colin Cowherd reacted to Baker Mayfield being called underrated by Pro Football Focus.
Let's look at Baker Mayfield's numbers in terms of underrated. With the best offensive line, I'm not even going to count his 3 years. I'm not going to do it because he's had some dysfunction, like Derek Carr's had. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to count 1 year last year when he had the coach of the year, Kevin Stefanski, who appears, and the GM, Andrew Berry, appear to be very smart, talented young executives and coaches. His completion percentage significantly lower than Carr. TD interception ratio is fine. Passer rating lower. But, I mean, Baker's numbers are fine. But that's with the coach of the year, the best offensive line, a clear Jarvis Landry's a great young receiver. He's not a top 5, but he's really, really good. Excellent running backs. Look at those numbers. Let's go back to the synonyms for underrated. Unnoticed, unrecognized. Folks, Lamar Jackson has been an MVP, doesn't have one national TV commercial. Baker Mayfield is like Blake Griffin. I can't watch a sporting event without him showing up on my television set.
He sounds a little put up. Here's what I would say. Baker Mayfield deserves Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry for the 3 years he had before that and all the dysfunction. So he deserves to play for the coach of the year based on what he's gone through.
Underrated is a poor adjective for Baker Mayfield. That I agree with Colin Cowherd. He's the overall number 1 pick. He won the Heisman. He is on every commercial that you see on TV. PFF, you have to take PFF the right way. PFF is talking statistically, well, look, his stats are this, but actually people think this, but actually the stats would say this, and the hidden stats show this. So maybe there's a statistical category for it. That's just the wrong. You're just going to set people up. I don't even think Baker Mayfield thinks he's underrated. But part of the reason that people would have a case to make that Baker Mayfield is underrated is because people like Colin Cowherd sometimes act like he stinks, and he doesn't stink. So it's like Cowherd arguing against him being underrated after throwing shade at him for 3 years, and practically he's the reason he's on the list. But I think here Colin is right. Underrated is not the right word for him. But I think the case he's trying to make, I still don't think you can make a case and just say Baker Mayfield last year, because it's the second half of last year. And I don't know what his passer rating was in the second half compared to the first half, but we can't act like Baker Mayfield's been this quarterback for a full season and just look at full 16-game 2020 stats and say, well, look at that, because that's not really it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about second half of the season. And I know it. We've talked about it a lot last year. Second half of the year, I think statistically, you would be talking about a guy who's a top 7, top 9 quarterback in the league. And that's a more fair statistical point to make. To just flash those like Colin did and say 2020 stats, I think is not the point.
Okay. So the question put to Baker Mayfield was, what does Odell Beckham Jr., who wasn't there for the second half of last year, what does he bring to this offense now that he's potentially back?
Yeah, obviously his catching ability speaks for itself, but I think people forget how truly fast he is. To be able to take the top off of defenses, and safeties have to worry about that. And so teams are going to have to defend it and pick their poison, because we're a physical run-first mentality team, and that's not going to change no matter who we have out there at receiver, but he adds an element to where teams are going to have to decide. For me, it's just going through my reads. We're going to call the shots, and Kevin's going to get those dialed up when he feels comfortable in doing so. And for me, it's just going through the reads, not forcing anything. And much like the mentality I had second half of last year, just find the open guy and go through my reads, trust the system, and go through my progressions every play.
And Doug, I think Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. would have made a huge difference if he was on the field against the Chiefs. Tyrann Mathieu was not worried about anybody getting behind him that entire game, and that's the reason that Nick Chubb had some issues running the football.
100% right. I don't know that you can beat the Chiefs without some kind of threat like that at receiver. And I do think sometimes, again, I think we're falling into something a little bit maybe, because on our Orange and Brown Talk podcast that we put out, I think today, we were making declarations. And one of mine was that Odell will average 80 receiving yards per game, which a year ago would have ranked him 10th in the league. And in a 17-game season, that's over 1,300 yards. And I think you can fall into a trap of like, well, Baker's just going to take the open guy. This isn't an offense that does that. They're going to spread it around. They have a lot of guys. And I think that's true. And I think a year ago, the Browns found some things that opened up in the second half every now and then with deep shots because teams didn't respect it because Odell wasn't on the field. So I think that led to sometimes Donovan Peoples-Jones getting some shots down the field, in part because nobody was worried about it. But here's my point. Everybody knows Tyreek Hill is good. The Chiefs have other good players. And you know what Tyreek Hill does all the time? He scorches defenses. Because the Chiefs, no matter how much defense is planned for it, find a way to get Tyreek Hill involved. Why? Because he's their fastest, most explosive guy. So why can't that be the Browns? Now, I know they're going to run it. And I know the Chiefs don't have a run game like the Browns do. But the idea that they're going to just treat Odell like one other guy, well, we got to spread it around. Or that, well, defense are going to try to take that away. Try to take Tyreek Hill away. Guess what? It doesn't matter. He still burns you. That's what I think. I'm not saying Odell at this point in his career is Tyreek Hill, but man, he's the closest thing the Browns are probably ever going to have in this era. So why wouldn't you put a focus on getting that guy the ball? And why would you think that that guy would somehow inhibit your offense or like take Baker out of his game? I think he has a big year ahead. And I think Kevin Stefanski knows what Odell Beckham Jr. is, and they will get him the ball within the plan, but realizing he's their most dangerous receiver, and why wouldn't you focus on that guy?
I would agree. I think the point is there are schematically Kevin Stefanski will have plays that are designed where the ball will go to Odell Beckham Jr. unless the defense is, playing off of somebody else. And I think that comes back to Kevin Stefanski and the play calling. Keep in mind, he got comfortable the second year with Baker. He didn't have the ability to get comfortable with how to use Odell Beckham in the play calling, and he will do that. And Kevin Stefanski talked about it. He's as critical, probably more critical of his play calling than anybody else is.
Yeah, very critical. I think I have to be better. I've told the players that before. I don't think I did a very good job in a bunch of moments last year, and then we've tried to identify some ways we can be better this year. But I can't ask the guys to improve and not look inward as well.
And I think that's one of the ways they can be better is plays that get Odell one-on-one or get Odell the ball in some open space.
I've always said Kevin Stefanski sucked as a play caller, so I'm glad that Kevin Stefanski finally agreed. It's funny. I like smart, capable. There was like a New York Times study like years and years ago, right? Maybe they just wrote about it. Someone else did the study. My family talks about it all the time. People who are terrible at something think they're good at it because they don't understand stuff enough to even understand what good is. And people who are good at something often think they're terrible at it because they're so competent and have such a grasp on things, they know every little thing they do wrong. So like to hear Kevin Stefanski be like, I made a ton of mistakes in the play call. It's like, yeah, we get it. You're smart. They have to get him the ball, and they will. And I do think there were times last year where he was open and Baker wouldn't let it go. So I think that's part of it too. Sometimes we're like, man, the play caller didn't dial anything up, and the play caller actually would whisper to you, I did dial it up, but the guy didn't throw it, right? So I think there were some moments of that early last year when Odell was on the field, and that's where I think the biggest improvement will come. I don't know how much more they have to dial up, but Baker's got to take it when it's there. And listen, again, just to finalize, Aaron Rodgers finds a way to get the ball to Devontae Adams all the time. Josh Allen found a way to get the ball to Stephon Diggs last year all the time. So why can't the Browns find a way to get the ball to Odell Beckham Jr. all the time? I know they're going to run it, but I think they can run it a lot and also get the ball to their best receiver all the time. I just think it's a big year coming.
Doug Lesmerises and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. On the other side of the break, we'll hear about one of the most underrated players in the NFL. Kevin Stefanski will also talk about the free agent class. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine. Too late at night. But feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
Sports for CLE continues. We continue talking Browns football. So, Emmanuel Acho, the most underrated player in the NFL. Speak for yourself.
I would argue Baker Mayfield is the most underrated player in the National Football League. Here is why.
Let's go.
When you look at any company, corporation, or leader, you always have to look at wins or improvement above replacement.
Okay.
If a CEO gets replaced, let me look at what the new CEO and how the new CEO improved the bottom line. If a television host gets replaced, how did the new host improve television ratings? If a quarterback gets replaced, how did the quarterback improve the win column? Baker Mayfield took a Cleveland Browns team that was 0-16 and a Cleveland Browns team that was 1-15. And within 3 years, he had double-digit wins. Wow. That is a greater improvement, if you all will, than what Josh Allen did in Buffalo because the Bills made the playoffs in 2017, what Lamar Jackson did in Baltimore because the Ravens made the playoffs in 2014, won a Super Bowl in 2012. What Patrick Mahomes did in Kansas City because the Chiefs made the playoffs 4 of the previous 5 years before Patrick Mahomes showed up. So what Baker Mayfield has done in Cleveland is a greater improvement than what Patrick Mahomes has done, what Josh Allen has done, and what Lamar Jackson has done. Yet we talk about Baker Mayfield as if he is a slouch. Baker Mayfield is underrated.
And Doug, you don't like the underrated, but again, I think it's based on what the national perspective is. And that's usually the national storyline, Doug, is that he's not a top 10 or a top 15 quarterback. And I love the hair. It's messed up.
What is this conversation? Neither side of this conversation makes sense. He's not underrated. No, who thinks he's a slouch? Who thinks he's a... Sometimes I feel like the national people, it's like they discovered the Browns existed 15 minutes before the show starts. Listen, I have a national college football playoff podcast now where I talk about national college football teams. And sometimes I don't know as much about all the teams as I do about Ohio State. And I sometimes understand you have to do this. Sometimes the stuff that people say about the Browns makes no sense. The idea that like people don't realize the Browns were 1-31 before he got here and they think he stinks, but now he's like, he's neither of those. The point made there, he's not either one of those things. He's in the middle. And everybody who actually knows the Browns knows exactly what Baker Mayfield is. Nobody in Cleveland has they know exactly what Baker is. He is a very good quarterback who's been in a tough situation, who's getting better, and has been a key to the Browns getting to this point. Let me tell you about a team. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They are in a state called Ohio, and I don't know if you know where Ohio is, but it is between New York and Los Angeles. And let me tell you, it is a state where they invented football. And the man who is going to invent football again in Cleveland is a man you have never heard of. He was the number 1 pick. He was the Heisman Trophy winner. You have never heard of him. Baker Mayfield, I just discovered him 10 minutes ago. He's going to be the MVP. He's underrated. Give me the credit for acknowledging it.
Okay. Now on to something. All right, we're good.
That was the worst.
We're gonna switch focus real quick. You have a book coming out on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Tell us about it.
Great. So that's the lead into my book promo. No one's going to buy a book from this person at this point.
They're gonna love it.
Who would buy a book from me? I'm a lunatic.
I'm signing up. That's the best reading.
It's called The Road to, it's called The Road to Ohio State. It comes out next Tuesday officially. It is 17 recruiting tales of interesting Buckeyes through the years. I talked to Ryan Day. I talked to Urban Meyer. I talked to Jim Tressel. I talked to John Cooper. I talked to Kerry Combs. I talked to Tony Alford. It's players like Ryan Shazier, Cam Hayward, the Bosa brothers, Travion Henderson, the freshman running back on the team right now, Kenny Guyton, Jim Otis, Tom Skladany, Keith Byers, Eddie George, James Laurinaitis, Dante Whitner, Cleveland's own. Through the years, I wanted to cover kind of every era of Ohio State football, all kinds of different recruitments. And these guys were so gracious with their time, talked to their high school coaches, their parents, the Ohio State people involved. Michael Jenkins, great story of Michael Jenkins coming up from Florida, choosing Ohio State, catches Holy Buckeye. So I think if you're an Ohio State football fan, if you're interested in recruiting at all, and even if you're not a diehard fan, it's a lot of personal stories, right? Of like the kind of the ups and downs of recruiting and what goes into a choice. So diehard Ohio State fan, casual Ohio State fan, I hope both types of fans will enjoy it. The Road to Ohio State, you can pre-order it on Amazon now, and it should be in bookstores, I hope, all over the place next week. And I apologize for saying this while looking like a crazy person, but I did it to myself.
You look very authorish. You're a distinguished author, very scholarly. Again, Tuesday it's in bookstores, The Road to Ohio State. Some great twists and turns in the recruiting trail for the Buckeyes. Doug Lesmerises, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. A lot of fun. Thanks very much, Doug.
Sorry I ruined your show.
All right. Doug Lesmerises, make sure you read him in the pages of the Plain Dealer as well as on cleveland.com. And remember, the Ohio State book available next week. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we head down to Kansas City to get the Chiefs' perspective of things. Leif Lisec, Chiefs analyst for Spectrum Sports KC, will join us. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Sports for CLE continues. We continue talking Browns. A little bit different slant. We're going to head down to KC. Welcome in Leif Lisec. He is a Chiefs analyst for Spectrum Sports Kansas City. Leif, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate the time. Let's ask you this. How do the Chiefs approach playing the Browns at home in Arrowhead in Week 1?
Well, I think everybody, and I'm sure you feel it in Cleveland as well, we felt it in high school games building up. I mean, people are just so hungry for sports again. Arrowhead had limited capacity a year ago. I mean, fans are they are chomping at the bit for this game. I know, and no disrespect to the Browns. It could be the Browns, it could be Jacksonville, it could be anybody. I think right now, the Kansas City fans are just hungry for football, hungry to bring that atmosphere back to Arrowhead, the tailgating, the all-day event that it has become. And I think they are chomping at the bit, and I know the players must feel the same way.
Yeah, and you know, this year, a lot of excitement with the Browns making the return to the playoffs, where the Chiefs ended some of the dreams of the Browns fans and Browns players. Let's talk about this. Now, obviously, you have Patrick Mahomes, and he's special. I mean, defense can do everything right, and Patrick Mahomes can make the play turn out in the Chiefs' favor. But what are some areas of concern for Kansas City's offense?
Well, I think the first thing you have to look at is the offensive line. The Chiefs have 5 new starters, or will have 5 new starters when they open the season on Sunday, from the team that took the field in the Super Bowl. I can't remember, just based on our research, any Super Bowl team that came back with 5 new starters along the offensive line. On top of that, the 3 on the right side, if you count center and right guard and right tackle, are basically rookies. So they've had a decent preseason. It looks like that is going to come together. Trey Smith at guard looks like he could be the steal of the draft for the Chiefs this season. Has played very, very well. Lucas Niang sat out last season, but he still basically is a rookie. And Creed Humphrey at center, very talented. They're going to allow the Chiefs to do a lot of things I think that Andy Reid likes to do. But again, there's no substitute for experience. And, you know, and granted, they have not seen in the preseason, I think, the defense, and especially the defensive front, that they're going to see Sunday against Cleveland. I think that is the number one concern for everybody in Kansas City, and maybe even for Andy Reid a little bit. You know, you think you know what you have until the lights come on and the ball gets kicked, and then you see what really happens. I think they feel good about what they have there, but it's still untested, and that's the great unknown.
When you look at the wide receiving core, Tyreek Hill obviously one of the best in the NFL. You've got Travis Kelce, a local guy here from Cleveland Heights who is one of the best tight ends. But Sammy Watkins leaves, and what do you have? What's that wide receiving core depth look like now?
Well, they have a lot of candidates, but nobody's really stepped forward to take that role. Sammy Watkins was hurt a lot, but if you go back and look at the Super Bowl, their victory over San Francisco, Sammy Watkins played a pretty big role in that game, and I think he took a lot of heat off Tyreek Hill. They don't have a replacement right now for Sammy Watkins. McCole Hardman, I think they have really hoped that he would grab that in the preseason. At times, it almost looked like they forced him the ball just to get him some confidence and get him going. I'm not sure that really happened. Byron Pringle's another guy that's a little bigger body, could be a possession receiver for him. Demarcus Robinson is back. Those guys are capable, but so far nobody has taken that job. It's really by the horns and latched onto it. I think that is maybe one concern as you look at the Chiefs. You mentioned Travis Kelce, who has just been an absolute workhorse. In the last 3 seasons, Kelce has played 3,400 snaps. Tyreek Hill, 2,900 snaps. Hill had a clavicle injury that kept him out a couple of weeks during that span. But Kelce, other than the games that Andy Reid held them out of, has not missed a game. And so the Chiefs have tried hard as well, kept 4 tight ends on the roster this year, trying to find somebody to complement Kelce, maybe just to give him a spell, because he has stretched the rubber band pretty tight for the Chiefs since he's been here.
When you look at the running game, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I mean, that was a rookie that, was banged up. What's he looked like, and how big of a jump do the Chiefs and Andy Reid expect him to take in his second year?
Well, and here's the thing to look at. And if Edwards-Helaire is healthy and Andy Reid is able to get this offensive line to play like they did, Mitch Holtis, a Chiefs broadcaster, brought up a great point. He said, go back and look at the Chiefs when Jamal Charles was in Kansas City and the screen passes that they ran with Jamal Charles. That's what they'd like to get back to, I think, with Andy Reid and this new offensive line. A little bit more athletic, maybe can get downfield a little more. And a rule change that nobody is really talking about is once they get downfield, those defensive backs can no longer go low on offensive linemen to wipe out the wedge, if you will. So those offensive linemen now get some speed going downhill. They're going to be running in front of Clyde Edwards-Helaire when those safeties drop back to kind of keep Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce in front of them. The Chiefs, I think that screen game is going to be huge for Kansas City. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, really, I mean, the reason that they drafted him, Mahomes was the one who said, watch him in the passing game. That was what really sold them on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He was not very good inside the red zone last year for the Chiefs running the ball. That was a weakness for them. So behind that new offensive line and Edwards-Helaire, how he's able to maybe change his running style a little bit more inside the 10-yard line especially, I think could be a key for them as well.
Talking with Leif Lisec, Chiefs analyst for Spectrum Sports in Kansas City. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, Leif and I will talk defense. We'll switch sides of the ball. What to expect from the Chiefs defense as they get ready for the opener against the Browns. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to Sports for CLE. Browns facing the Chiefs, one of the most anticipated matchups in Week 1 of the NFL, and we continue to talk Chiefs with Leif Lisec, Chiefs analyst for Spectrum Sports in Kansas City. Let's change focus to the Chiefs defense. Now, Tyrann Mathieu is supposedly on the COVID list, might be out. Do the Chiefs expect him to play? It sounds like Andy Reid kind of expected that a little bit earlier in the week. What's your read on that situation, Leif?
It sounds like it, and I would expect that he is going to play. And I literally, as I was walking in the studio, Andy Reid was talking about it, and I believe he said his tests are getting better. So I truly don't know what that means when it comes to COVID tests. I think if I heard that right as I was walking in, I would expect that he's going to play. Yes, and he is really going to be relied upon to kind of pull this young secondary together on defense. I think that secondary, though they're young, played pretty well towards the end of last year. If Tyrann Mathieu is not there to hold them together, that could be a really big concern for the Chiefs on Sunday. Yeah, and again, I don't think he can study for any of those COVID tests, so it's probably just a matter he's getting better. So what about areas of concern? On the defensive side of the ball for the Chiefs, areas that are areas of concern. Well, linebacker has been kind of a weak spot for the Chiefs. Through the last couple of years. They drafted Nick Bolton out of Missouri, who we're going to see on Sunday. Athletic, brings some coverage skills to that area. So I think that's going to help them. Secondary is going to be I don't want to say a concern, but it'll be really interesting to see how they play early in the season, especially against good offenses like they're going to see on Sunday. The biggest key, I think, for the Chiefs on defense is going to be Chris Jones. They are figuring out a way to move Chris Jones along that defensive line. And from what we've seen just glimpses of in the preseason, and again, it's preseason, it looks like this is going to be a year for Chris Jones. I think he is going to be huge, being able to exploit matchups along that offensive line. I think is going to be key for the Chiefs. Chris Jones, I think, is set up for a monster year. All right. Chiefs have had some fast starts under Andy Reid, without question. Patrick Mahomes, 10-0 in September. I don't think he's thrown an interception in the month for his career. What is the secret to the fast starts under Andy Reid? And it's not just in Kansas City. Everywhere Andy Reid goes, he seems to win early in the year. Andy Reid is 20-5 in September here in Kansas City, 7-1 in season openers. And look, and you know, Andy Reid, after a bye week, you know, his record is phenomenal. And basically this year, with that off week after the last preseason game, he gets another bye week to study up and get ready. I don't know what it is. I think the guy is just, he is so good at calling up plays and making game plans. And when you give him an extra week, you give him the offseason to plan and get ahead, I think that's where he's at his best. And that's it truly has been that way in Kansas City. As you say, Philadelphia was just as good. He has been so solid in September, and I just think it's that summer of preparation. You give him that much time to get ready for opponent or opponents. At this case, I just think he's better than everybody else. I can't wait to see what he dials up offensively when the Chiefs take the field for real, because it's been pretty vanilla through the preseason, and I can't wait to see the screen game. I think is going to be, he is like a mad scientist with that screen game, and I can't wait to see what he dials up with this new offensive line and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think is going to be fun to watch for Chiefs fans. When you see the Chiefs looking at the Browns, what do you think the biggest area of concern is? Is there something that you think the Chiefs look at and go, this is an issue? I think their biggest concern is going to be how that young offensive line matches up against the Browns' defensive front. I think that's the game right there. If the Chiefs can protect Patrick Mahomes, you saw it in the Super Bowl when Patrick Mahomes does not have time to throw, and he's a great scrambler, but nobody can do it on the run all day long, and that was what hurt the Chiefs obviously against Tampa Bay. And if the Chiefs can protect Patrick Mahomes, keep him upright, give him some time, I think they'll be fine. If that offensive line gets rattled a little bit early on, I think it could be a long day for the Chiefs. I really do. If they are able to run the ball with that offensive line, as we talk about the screen game, get that going a little bit, Patrick Mahomes will be fine, but it's keeping him upright and giving him, make it two-dimensional. Get a little running game going in there, a little screen game going. I think the Chiefs will be fine, but I think you'll know pretty early on how that young offensive line is going to match up against a great Cleveland Browns defense.
When you look at some of the young guys, who are some guys that have kind of stood out in preseason that you expect to be a factor? You know, we know Mahomes, we know Edwards-Helaire, you know Tariq.
Yeah.
Who are some guys whose names we might not have heard here in Cleveland that are going to be counted on for the Chiefs?
Well, I think Jaron Reed is quietly maybe the biggest addition for them in the middle. He is what has allowed really Chris Jones to move along that defensive line. How he plays is really going to be a key for that Chiefs defense, and so far so good for the Chiefs because, as I said, that defensive line has looked really, really good. Trey Smith, who has stepped in at guard for the Chiefs, had some blood clot issues coming out during the draft, and so he saw his stock fall from maybe a late first rounder, second rounder, all the way down to the 6th round. He has just been tremendous for the Chiefs on that offensive line. So watch him at right guard and see how he's able to hand himself against that Cleveland front. And Chiefs fans are waiting to see Nick Bolton, the linebacker they drafted out of Missouri, will be a key guy for them as well, as we talked about with the injuries hitting the Chiefs linebacking core a little bit here, at least to start the season. He's going to be called upon to play maybe a bigger role than what they had thought, at least initially, right to the start of the season. He's a guy that can bring some coverage skills to that linebacking core, which I think will really help him. I would say those three will be pretty key for the Chiefs to watch.
Leif Lisec, analyst for KC Sports Spectrum, Chiefs analyst. Leif, appreciate the time. Let's make a deal. When we face each other in the playoffs, let's do it again.
Yeah, you stopped him on 4th down. This may have been a different story, right?
That's right. Leif Lisec, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Anytime.
All right, so that'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you again tomorrow at 4. Scheduled guests, the D-Man, Dennis Maniloff. We'll have our picks against the spread, as well as Ryan Kavanaugh. We will talk some high school football from across Northeast Ohio. That is tomorrow at 4 right here on Sports for CLE. We'll see you then. Have a great night, everybody.